हरे कृष्णा। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी अष्टाध्यायशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय राधा गोकुलानंद राधा गोकुलानंद श्री राधे। जय राधा गोकुलानंद राधा गोकुलानंद श्री राधे। जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व। Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Yajna ki Jai, Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Ilaga. Enaka? Okay. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. It's been a while. It's been over a month since we did this. The last Gita class was on the summary between chapters 7 to 12, and so now we're just going to carry on with chapter 13 onwards. We obviously stopped for exams, and before anyone asks, they went okay. They went how exams go. And so today we're going to carry on with 13, which is entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. This is a more technical aspect, and I can say probably out of all the other chapters of the Gita, one of the most technical or most analytical, but that's what also makes it very interesting as well. So without further ado, we'll do the invocation and get straight in. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay. So the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita that we dealt with, it started off obviously with Arjuna having the dilemma and Krishna answering that through a logical chain of progression, logical chain of reasoning, step by step, going into each and every step. And so that's how the Bhagavad Gita started. The first 6 chapters, we deal a lot with the topic of action and inaction. The first concept that's introduced is the concept of the body and the soul. If we understand simply that one, that makes a massive difference in our life. So that's chapter 2, what to speak of chapter 13, where we're at now. And that's just the idea that there is something beyond this material body which is empowering it. And you can see through examples of reincarnation, the idea that the body changes and the soul is the same, MDs, all of these things. We can perceive the soul just as in science, sometimes you do a Benedict's test where you can perceive glucose. You don't see the glucose physically, you don't see it. It's too small to be seen. But you can perceive it by doing tests, etc. And so that's the first concept. And then majority of the first 6 chapters, we deal with the idea of action or inaction. When I'm happy when I'm not working. I'm happy when I'm not working, that means I should not work. Or is it better, instead of changing my environment, that's one way of doing that. I can change my environment. I can go to a more peaceful place, maybe stop working, sit down and meditate, or I can change my consciousness, my perspective. So it doesn't matter what environment I'm in, as long as I change my perspective, which one's better? Or it's good. The whole point is trying to control the mind. Can I control the mind when I'm not doing any work? Can I control the mind while doing work in the right consciousness and things like that? That's what the first 6 chapters deal with. Lord Krishna then advocates through the whole process. He advocates mainly naishkarmya, what we call doing work, but without caring for the result of the work. Very easy to say, very hard to do in practice, but we need to make sure that we do it. I can easily say, oh yeah, become Krishna conscious, fully surrender, but it's actually about applying that in our life. There's no point. Krishna gives the knowledge to Arjuna. What does he say? You can take it and do whatever you want. Iti te jnanam, that one. That verse, whatever you want, you do. It's up to you. And then Arjuna understands, and not just does he understand, but he also applies it. And then he goes, Nashto moha smritir. Now my illusion is gone because I've actually applied. See, anyone can tell you a concept. Sometimes in science exams, they tell us a concept and they put a question. And everyone says, oh, the question is too difficult. And that question, we never learned that question. Yes, of course, you didn't learn the actual question, but the concept you had to apply there. And if it's actually applying the concept is where you see the difference. So that's the same principle here in the Gita as well. We can all understand the knowledge. I want to get stronger. I want to go to the gym. So I can get someone and go, you can start telling me, oh, you do this exercise, this one and this. That's good. Do I become strong? No, I have to actually now act based on that advice. So it's the same principle in the Bhagavad Gita. Then the second 6 chapters from 7 to 12, very, very sweet chapters, the sweetest chapters in the Gita. They deal with the devotional service, the topmost means, the topmost yoga practice, the culmination of all other yoga practices. Greater than Lord's greatness. He's very great, as we see in chapters 10 and 11, but greater than his greatness is his sweetness. And so it's that loving devotional service. It's all that innate desire to serve. You'll see people get pets because it's in our innate desire to love and serve. And so that's the most sweet and endearing means of devotion or yoga in which we can connect ourselves with the Lord. That's described in the second section of chapters. And now the third section, or the third 6 chapters of the Gita from chapters 13 to 18 deal with knowledge, exclusively knowledge, about understanding. Now that you know that devotion is the topmost means, there's more. So why does Krishna give this knowledge? Is this better than devotional service? Or is it that this is now a new means? It's because now if you don't have enough knowledge, then your faith won't be as strong. If you have knowledge, your faith will be stronger. Things make more sense, and when your faith is stronger, you can become more loving, emotional, and that's how you see the change in the character. Okay, so with that, into what I will probably say is the most technical, not that big, analytical, in a sense, sciencey, or mathematically minded, if you like, chapter, and it's very in that way abstract. You really have to think, and that's good. But there's also another point which we'll have to keep in mind constantly, is that, okay, that's very good and all. I now even maybe understand it, but do I apply it in my life? To what extent do I apply it? So please do keep that in mind. It's application of knowledge which makes the difference. So the first 7 verses of this chapter, from verses 1 to 7, we deal with the answers to questions 3, 4, and 5. But where is the question? The question comes in verse number 1, so we start there. Okay, so, I forgot to get this ready on this laptop. It's okay. So the first section is to do with answering the questions. So as we know from the Bhagavad Gita, constantly the Lord allows Arjuna to answer questions. And just in the same way at the start of the 8th chapter, that he asked questions about technical terms he didn't understand at the end of the 7th chapter, immediately he goes, my dear Lord, I don't understand. What is this? What is the meaning of this and this and that? He starts asking all these questions, and this is what Lord answers. It begins with the, Kim means what? So what's this and what's that? He answers all of these, and he gets the answer to them throughout the chapter. This is the quality of a good student and a good teacher. First point that we ever learn is the quality of a good student. Whenever they don't know, they ask questions in a nice, submissive, humble manner, not to challenge, but to try and understand. And when a good quality of good teachers, they let the student answer these questions. If a teacher doesn't allow students to answer questions, then they aren't actually a good teacher. Just hear and understand, that's it, simple. No, that's not how it works. The quality of good teachers, they encourage students to understand, and they also explain in a way that students can understand. And so we'll see as a guru or a teacher that Lord Krishna is a very good teacher, and he embodies that very clearly. Okay, so the first verse, Arjuna uvacha Prakriti Purusham chaiva Ksetra.Ksetrajna Jnana etad veditumicchami Jnanam Jneyam cha Keshava. So he's mentioned 6 technical terms. I was about to put 7 up. 6 technical terms: Prakriti Purusham, Ksetra.Ksetrajna Jnanam, and Jneyam. These are the 6 technical terms which he's asked. He says, my dear Lord, I need you to explain what these are to me. And the Lord immediately answers. But the point is, this is immediately what student from the get-go, when we don't understand things, then we should ask. When there is doubts, then our faith becomes weaker. But if we clarify those doubts, our faith becomes much stronger, which means our devotion can then be much stronger. Those 6 terms are first, Prakriti, which means nature or material nature. Purusha means the enjoyer. Kshetra is a field. field of where these activities are taking place, the field. A little abstract, but it'll make more sense as the chapter goes along. And Ksetrajna means the one who knows the field. So the field, the knower of the field is Ksetrajna, and Jnanam is knowledge, and Jneyam, very similar, they sound very similar, but Jneyam is slightly different because it's the one who knows the knowledge. The object of the knowledge. And so, or the goal of knowledge. And so the first verse is just these 6 terms, that's all. And Lord Krishna immediately answers in this first section, he answers questions 3, 4, and 5. What is Kshetra? What is Ksetrajnam? Or Ksetrajna? And what is Jnana? He immediately answers 3, 4, 5. Because what does a good teacher do? A good teacher starts off the easier concepts first. Why it's easy for you to understand, not the question, not which order you've asked the questions, but what will make most sense to you. And so immediately answers the easiest and most obvious things. Start from where you know and build on that knowledge. And so that's what Lord Krishna does here. So in the second verse, immediately, Lord Krishna answers that the body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetram ityabhidiyate. So the field of activity, or the place where activity takes place, sounds confusing, but that's the idea. Where does activity happen? That is the body. The body does the activities. And who's the person that knows how this field works? So the person that knows in the case how the body works, that's of course the soul. This is what Lord Krishna has given. We know this already from 2nd chapter. Now we get into the more interesting thing. Because then in the 3rd verse, Lord goes on to complicate it a little further. This is what takes this further than the 2nd chapter. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata Ksetra.Ksetrajna Jnanam yattajnanam matam mama. You'll notice in these verses just Kshetra, Jnana, Jneya, Ksetrajna, all Prakriti, these same words going over and over and over again. And so he says in the 3rd verse, O sign of Bharata, you should understand that I am the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So he said, there's a body, the field of action is the body, Kshetra, body. Ksetrajna is the soul, but there's also another Ksetrajna. And this is where we get the new stuff coming in. The Supersoul, the Paramatma, the one who knows all bodies. And this is the difference. I know what I'm thinking. I don't know what my dad's thinking. I don't know what my sister's thinking. I don't know what my mother's thinking. I only know what I'm thinking. But there's one person in everyone, and that is the Supersoul, the Paramatma, who is there and he knows exactly what everyone is thinking perfectly. So the difference between the soul and the Supersoul is that the soul is sometimes called the Anuatma because it's the soul as a normal soul, or the Jivatma, the living entity, and then you've got the Paramatma or the Vibhuatma, the Supersoul, which is the Lord. They're not two same things. They're not one and the same, but they're two different people that are there in the body. Not people, two different identities. I am not the body, I'm the soul in the end. And so the soul only knows one body, their own, and the Supersoul knows everyone's body and perfectly. I only know what I know to a certain extent. I might know this body, but I don't know perfectly this body. I don't know exactly how each system in the body works. I don't know exactly how when I take a tablet, this reaction happens and this antihistamine stopped me from getting all these, what you call little spots from pollen. I took an antihistamine, it all went. I don't know how it works. My knowledge even of my own field is not perfect, but the Lord knows each and everyone's field perfectly. Right. Next, we have the Jnana as well, which is mentioned in the 3rd verse. Jnana, or knowledge, is to understand the body and its knower. So to understand, in this case, the body, the soul, and the Supersoul, this is knowledge. Why is this real knowledge compared to all the other types of knowledge? We'll see later on in the chapter. Okay, so the first concept, the body soul concept, and the next one we'll get onto is the soul Supersoul concept. There is a living entity called the soul, the jiva. This is what empowers the body and gives it consciousness. There is a Supersoul, which is the Lord, who sanctions the various activities that happen in these bodies. And so the difference is there. The soul is not one with the supersoul. Neither is the soul different from the supersoul. But the soul is one with the supersoul, and the soul is different from the supersoul. This is called achintya, or inconceivable, because, simply put, monism and dualism that are conceivable cannot be correct, because the Lord by nature is inconceivable. The Lord himself is inconceivable. So if you can conceive it, that means you know it's wrong. But if you can't conceive it, that means you know it's right. That's how to go with it, simply. And so if you can conceive it, then it's not right, because you can understand it. And if you can't conceive it, then it is right. It has to at least be inconceivable by nature. Okay, and the soul is described that it's the same but different. Achintya beda abeda tattva. Beda means different. The soul is not the same as God. Why? Because the soul and the super soul are different in quantity, whereas abheda means same, non-different. And the soul and the super soul are the same in quality. What's an easy way of explaining this? Because that seems really complicated. The best way to explain it is with the ocean. If I take a flask, a conical flask, a beaker, sorry, and I put it into the ocean, I can get a sample of water. Now, compare that water with the water in the ocean. That is the same water that's there in the ocean, but there's a different amount. In my beaker, there's only so much water, 250 milliliters. And in the ocean, there's a vast amount of water. And so it's this abheda, achintya beda abheda tattva. The relationship between the Lord and the living entity is that they're the same in quality, but different in quantity. The reason they are different in quantity is because the Lord has those same qualities, but to a much larger extent. We have those qualities, bindu bindutaya, atomically, they're tiny. And so we don't see great depth in those qualities that the Lord can see. So this is the relation between the soul and the super soul. This is mentioned to confirm as well in the 15th chapter, the end of the 15th chapter, that the super soul is different from the spirit soul in identity, but they're the same in quality still as well. And they're also different in quantity. So that itself is the most inconceivable concept which we deal with in this chapter. Then in the 4th verse, then we understand from the 4th verse that further distinctions of knowledge Lord will give. The field of activity, the composition of the material nature, the changes of the body, how it's produced, and the knower of the fields and the power or the influence of those fields. These are the various things Lord will go on to describe, just further details. But 5th verse is very nice. The 5th verse, he says, Rishabir bahuda gitam chandobir vividhai pratak brahma sutra padeshchaiva hetumadbir vinishyate. Even though the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's saying this. The knowledge of the fields of activities and the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in the Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. And so, even though he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what does he say? He says that, okay, I will explain, but just to confirm, you can check this. I'm going to explain in brief. You can check this elsewhere in the Vedanta Sutra, in the Brahma Sutras, in the Vedanta Sutras, or in with the other people, other saintly people. They will also confirm this. So in Krishna consciousness, we have these 3 points that we always say: Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Whenever you have a problem, consult these 3. These 3 are never in conflict with each other. They're always together. Guru means the spiritual master, the person instructing you. Sadhu means a saintly person or a devotee. And Shastra means the Vedic literature. Okay? Some people say Vedic and Puranic things are different, but that's a misconception, actually. The Vedic literature is the same, and it's fully been explained, and Vyasadeva has explained everything very nicely. So these 3 are the points of checking. In this case, as we know from 2:7, chapter 2, verse 7, Arjun says, I am now the disciple, you become my spiritual master, explained. So in this case, Krishna is the guru. So he's explaining. And who's he saying? If you don't fully understand and you want to understand further, then check with the sadhu, the devotees, and the shastra. He says Rishabir, which means various other sages. And he's also Brahma Sutra Padeshchaiva. So this is Lord Krishna's explaining the deep concept of the Brahma Sutras. He's explaining very succinctly to Arjun here. If anyone is interested extremely in the Vedic literatures, the various Upanishads, the various ways they work. Please check that purport. There's a multitude of quotes from various Vedic literatures to show, this Upanishad, that Purana, all of that stuff is all covered there, further understanding. And so even though the Lord is giving a point, he's giving the point that sometimes people have this phrase, Bhava Vakya Praman, which means whatever Babaji says, I'll follow. I don't care what he says, whatever he says, I'll follow. But actually, Shastra is Praman. Shastra is Praman. Pramana means the basis or the fact. And that's what you take as fact, what is there in the literature. Sometimes people do, I'll say, and whatever I say, they'll listen to because I'm, I have certain following, I have certain understanding of Vedic literature, I can make up myself, I can call myself God. That's not the way it works. And so the Lord is saying that you should always verify these things with the other devotees and the Vedic literature. Because if they are having a conflict, then there is some problem there. So we need to have a look at that. Lord Krishna does not give a fake philosophy in Bhagavad Gita. That's why Sarvo Upanishado Gavo Dhokda Gopal Anandana. This Gita Upanishad, or the Bhagavad Gita, is like the essence of all Upanishads, is what Shankaracharya writes very nicely in the Gita Mahatmya. Then in text 6 and 7, we go into just further depth. The 24 elements are described of material creation, which makes up the body, and the interactions between these elements and the mind. If anyone is interested, you have the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether. You have knowledge acquiring senses, working senses, those are 5 as well. 5 sense objects, the mind, intelligence, false ego, and the pradhana, which constitute 24 elements. Knowing, or if you know or you don't know this, it actually doesn't make difference in the Krishna consciousness. It's a technicality. It's about what the practice is applied. So that's there for anyone who's interested, but that's also covered in that section. 24 elements of material nature, which constitutes the body. Those are the 24 elements, just further clarified there. Now, that's this first section. The second section, text 8 to 12, very, very nice verses and very beautiful. So we'll recite them. 5 verses that have been combined into one about knowledge. Often it can be called Jnanam, which is knowledge, which is one of the terms. So we've just covered Jnana, and now we're going to go into further depth on the process of understanding. Amanitvam adambitvam ahimsa shantirajavam acharyopasanam shaucham stairyamatma vinigraha. So the first few qualities, to acquire this knowledge, you've got to develop these qualities. Without this, you cannot understand the knowledge. This is what's explained here. It's not the result, but it's also the process. The process of acquiring knowledge is by using these qualities. Why is this called Jnana? Because this knowledge is what allows us to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. This is the real knowledge. All the knowledge which we are taught, for example, in schools, let's say I do economics, that knowledge will give its material knowledge, but it's temporary, and it doesn't lead to any good result. It doesn't lead to any end of cycle of birth and death. And so that knowledge is seen as not the fullest or the most true or the most real knowledge. So we'll start off. Some main qualities: humility, amanitvam, adambitvam, pridelessness. Real knowledge makes us humble, and especially this type of chapter where we realize how little we know and how little we can understand, it makes us very humble. If knowledge leads to pride, then the person has not understood the knowledge, or that is not the correct knowledge. Knowledge never makes one feel entitled. Devotee never feels entitled. Oh, I know so much. Yes, I know so much. I'll go and defeat all these scholars. I'll go and will all these philosophical debates. This is not real knowledge. Real knowledge makes one humble. Very important quality. Ahimsa Kshanti Rajavam. Ahimsa, non-violence. Shanti means tolerance, and Rajavam means simplicity. These types of qualities that we need to see. Are we developing them? Are we very calm? Are we not so, this is the practicality, not just technical, but very practically. Are we being angry? We know Krodha Bhavati Sammoha. From anger, there's a massive spiral going downwards that you don't want to get into. Are we being calm? Are we being non-violent? Are we being tolerant in our actions? Are we being simple? Are we overcomplicating things unnecessarily? These types of activities are really, really important that we cultivate them in our actions. And so other sorts of qualities I mentioned, we can't get into all of them in detail, but these are very, very practical. If anyone wants a measure or wants an indicator of how well you are developing or carrying out devotional service, then please look through the qualities and have a look and look. Okay, anger. I got too angry today. Okay, I need to bring it down. Non-violence. I wasn't at all non-violent. I got quickly angry and I punched someone when they got in an argument with me, or I shouted at them. Then that's not good. Pride. Someone said one nice thing to me. I now think I'm so cool and I don't listen to anyone else. These types of things. I'll just measure them against these qualities. This is a really good indicator. Shaucha means cleanliness. One of the things people say is cleanliness is next to godliness, but how often do we practice that? Let's actually practice that in our life to see a difference. And so the idea is there's self-control as well. Stairyam and atma vinigraha. Self-control means that you reject the things that are unfavorable. How much agitated am I being when these desires come? That is a measure as well. So naturally, we should try and fight the mind like that and stop it through devotional service. That's why mantra chanting means we can control the mind. Janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha doshana darshan. When you realize that birth, death, old age, and disease only lead to suffering, that is one quality. And so when you see that I'm doing all of this, samsara, I'm going round and round in this cycle of birth and death, there's no point. When you realize that leads to suffering, that's one indicator as well. Other ones that we have are anahankara. Anahankara means no false ego, which false ego is basically simply put, I think I'm the body and I want to enjoy. No false ego means I realize I'm the soul and my actual position is not enjoying but serving, because that's the real way to enjoy. And so it's like this. We go through those qualities and understand. 20 qualities are given. Now, the real knowledge liberates us. The fake knowledge binds us. That's the simple understanding. And if you look at these qualities, and then you go back to chapter 12. Chapter 12 at the ending, we covered several qualities. Adveshta sarva bhutanam maitraha karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankara samadukha sukakshami. Non-envious, friendly to all living entities, free from false ego, freed from sense of proprietorship. These types of, we see, actually, there's a very, very parallel sort of thing going on between the two. And the subtle subtext that we need to realize is that these qualities in Jnana Yoga, or by empirical understanding, we have to try ourselves. I kept on saying, you have to try and be angry. Not be angry, please. Try and be less angry. You have to try and control yourself. But in devotional service, they naturally come, which is a little interesting. It's the same qualities you get by devotional service, you get easily without any problem. And it's simply just by carrying out devotional service, you get it. And what does it lead to? That leads to further devotional service. That's why it's described that bhakti is the means and bhakti is the goal. I'm in the mode of ignorance. To come to the mode of goodness, I'll take devotional service. To go beyond mode of goodness to brahma-bhuta stage, see all living entities as equal, I'll take devotional service. From brahma-bhuta stage or atma-rama stage to go even further and to actually carry out loving devotion of the Lord, devotional service. Devotional service is what the process is, and it's also the goal of the process as well. We do devotion to become more devotional. It's one of the most interesting things about bhakti and bhakti yoga. It's that from any point, if you're on a ladder and you want to get to the next point on the ladder, by doing devotional service, you can get there. Not only that, but these qualities that are mentioned, they also endear one to the Lord in devotional service. In the devotion, remember, one of the things we saw in chapter 12 was the Lord kept on saying, me priya, priyosi me, priyo naraha, like that. He keeps on saying, that's the most dear person to me. Because in devotional service, we're not relying on our strength. The Lord provides. He says that in verses 6 and 7 of chapter 12, that I will provide, don't worry. So it's a little bit of understanding. So the only one that's here that is exclusive to devotional service in this chapter is the 16th quality. Mayi chananya yogena bhaktir avyabhicharini. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me with undeviating attention. So this is the hint. Why has the Lord mentioned devotion out of nowhere? It's because he wants to hint, at least. Remember that devotional service is there, and that is the process that you should take. And then finally, he says in verse number 19, I'm just going to get it up here. Oh, sorry, not verse number 19. In verse number 12, he's given the final understanding of these qualities, and then we go on to the object of knowledge. Okay, so the object of knowledge is the there's two objects of knowledge because there's two knowers. It's the two things we need to understand. The first bit is the body soul. The second thing is the soul supersoul. We've already covered that in brief. And so it's simply explained in verse number 13, which deals with the body. Sorry, not the body, the soul and the body. And so that you need to understand the soul. First thing you need to understand, I'm not the body, I am the soul. That gives us an understanding of that we are eternal, we are not temporary, and we're not affected by the material nature. Second thing we need to understand, from verses 14 to 18 in this chapter, is the more interesting supersoul. And it's actually very confusing if you originally look at it, until you get to the final verse. I'll read some of the translations and explain. In verse number 15, the supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he's without senses. He's unattached, although the maintainer of all living entities. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he's the master of all the modes of nature. So he is the source of all senses. He has no senses. He's unattached while seemingly attached as the maintainer of all living entities. And if you look, you might see a little parallel is there to chapter 9, where we talk about the Lord's achintya shakti, that the Lord is inconceivable by nature. And so in the 13 to 19 verses, we look at this Jneyam aspect. The super soul is the object of knowledge along with the spirit soul. Now, how can this be true, firstly? It seems like you're doing riddles. When you ask someone what gets wetter the more you dry. It's a towel, because the more you dry it, it gets wetter. Things like that. And you might seem, it's really confusing. So it might seem like a riddle originally. But when we understand properly, then there is no confusion. Simply put, the Lord is achintya. He's inconceivable. And the way you combine the two, let's give an example. Instead of going into philosophy, let's give another example. Okay, my sister says to me, I'm not eating any chocolate during the day. I'm not eating it. And every day I don't eat chocolate. But then I go and look and the chocolate is disappearing and there's no one else who's eating the chocolate. It's got to be her. How do I understand that? Every day I'm not eating chocolate, she means every night I am eating chocolate. So that's the way you understand it. So when the Lord says, I have no qualities, but I have qualities, what does he mean? This is called atapi in Vedic literature, reconciling. I have no qualities means I have no material qualities. I have qualities means I have only spiritual qualities. This is very important. If you look out of context, you'll become confused. That's why you have to look at the whole Bhagavad Gita and understand why the Lord is saying like this. Because he's inconceivable like that. How does he have no qualities, for example? In the Brahman impersonal feature. He's the source of the Brahman, as explained in the Isha Upanishad, as explained in chapter 14 at the end. He says that Brahmano hi pratishtaham. So that's how you understand. There's no material qualities there. So when he says he's without senses, it means he has no material senses. When he's unattached, although he's maintaining, we see that. Matstani sarva bhutani manacha matstani bhutani. He's maintaining living entities, he's unaffected, he's neutral. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he's the master of the modes of nature. Bhishma Dev says something very similar. Bhishma Dev says, my dear Lord, you give birth to this creation, and you enter into this creation. So it looks like the creation, you're coming into it, but actually it is coming from you. That seems very confusing. And so this is the nature of the Lord. He's naturally like that. This is not a contradiction, but as we will see later, it's an opulence of the Lord. Not a contradiction, it's an opulence. And it shows how great the Lord is. And so when you know how great the Lord is, we become humble. And also, we think, wow, my Lord is so great, yet he's so simple, yet he's so sweet. That's what we understand. So this is the really interestingly sort of, if you look at it, this is written almost like an Upanishad. We'll look at verse 16. It's the same sort of thing. The supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, moving and non-moving. He is subtle, he's beyond the power of senses, and he's far away, but he's also near. How does this make sense at all? How does he exist outside and inside of all living beings? One of the things the devotee does is the devotee sees antar bahir. That's why when we sing Narsimha prayers, we say, Bahir Narsimha Hridayir Narsimha Narasimha Madhim Sharanam Prapadye. Bahir Narsimha. Outside I can see Narsimha Dev. Bahir Narsimha Hridayir Narsimha. Inside my heart I also see Narsimha Dev. So we're looking, whatever, this is one thing that devotee quality always sees the Lord. Inside and outside of everything. The Lord is outside how? because he's there in the Paramatma feature, the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, he's there in every atomic part of the world. Every atom, the Lord is there. And how is he inside as well? Because he's there as the Supersoul in the heart. So everywhere one sees the Lord. That's one of the verses is there. Antar bahir yadi hari tapasata tatkim. Nantar bahir yadi hari tapasata tatkim. If you can see Hari, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, inside and outside of everything, what's the use of doing extra austerity in the forests? What's the use of going to forest and doing austerity? You've understood everything. There's no need to do any austerity. Nantar bahir yadi hari tapasata tatkim as well. If you don't understand that Hari is inside and outside of everything, and you haven't seen that, what's the use of doing austerity? Because your austerity doesn't lead to anything good. It doesn't lead to the ultimate goal of life. And so it's a sort of contradiction again there as well. If you see it, then don't do austerity. If you don't see it, also don't do austerity. This is a sort of very best way to explain is like a riddle-like explanation. Although the Lord is far away, he's near. How is he near us? How is he near us? He's in the heart as a Paramatma. How is he far away? He's in the spiritual world in Goloka Vrindavan. So this is how we understand that it's not a contradiction, but it shows the opulence. So we don't look at these things and think, oh, I'm so confused. But when you look from a devotee mindset, you go, wow, the Lord is amazing. He's so brilliant, I don't understand it. Although the Supersoul appears divided among all beings, he's never divided. He's situated as one. Although he's the maintainer of all living entities, it's to be understood that he devours and develops all. So although he's divided among beings, he's never divided. What does this mean? Just because the Paramatma is there in everyone's heart doesn't mean the Lord has been split. No one has cut him up. He's not exploded into so many pieces and gone. He's one. How is he one? Because the Lord Krishna, is the source of the Paramatma feature. Just in the same way the sun is there. Let's say this is the summer. This is a perfect example. The sun is there. I'm sitting in the garden. I can feel the presence of the sun has been spread throughout the garden, entirety of the garden. I'm there and my arms are burning. I have to put some sun cream on actually. So I can directly feel that the sun, his energy is, or the sun's energy is directly spread through the rays throughout the whole garden. And it's burning me. And does that mean now that the sun's in my garden, it's not in the sky? It's not outside? No, it's both. Because through the rays, it's everywhere. But as the sun planet or the sun globe or the actual core of the sun, as the star of the sun, it's over there. So the Lord is both immanent and transcendental. In philosophy, people get into this concept, immanence and transcendence. Immanence means the Lord is here within me. If the here in the earth, he interacts. He tells his devotees this, he tells this and that. Transcendent means he's beyond material creation, he doesn't get involved. So philosophers, they say, if the Lord is immanent, he can't be transcendent. If the Lord is transcendent, he can't be immanent. But actually, the reality is the Lord is both transcendent and immanent. He's beyond the modes of material nature, yet you see how he exhibits speeches day to day with the devotees. Devotees always say Krishna willing, because the Lord is immanent like that. And so, as soon as you bring about contradictions, is the Lord personal or impersonal? If he has no senses, then he's impersonal. But if he has senses, that means he's personal. And then you understand. When you look at the Bhagavad Gita, this is why you don't make up some speculative philosophy, what they call mental gymnastics. There's no need for that. The Lord is both. If you're just impersonal view, then you don't understand. If you're just a personal view, you don't understand. But if you take shelter of the Bhagavata view or the devotees, then you understand. The Lord is personal and he has an impersonal feature as well. So therefore, the Lord is also impersonal. This is the amazing, inconceivable potency of the Lord. Okay, finally, verse 18. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge, he's the object of knowledge, and he's the goal of knowledge. He's situated in everyone's hearts. If we read the verse, Jnanam, Jneyam, Jnanagamyam, Hridhi Sarvasya Vishtatam. That the Lord, he is the knowledge, because that is the knowledge is that the Supersoul. The goal of knowledge is to understand the Supersoul, and the object of knowledge is also to understand is the Supersoul, which is the thing that you want to be knowledgeable about. How do we know that this isn't the living entity? He says he's in everyone's heart. This is a really important point. I'm only here with me. I am limited, I am confined. Sometimes the example is given a field. Imagine a field, 4 walls, square field. There's a child playing. The child can do whatever they want in that field. They're constricted by the field. They can't go outside of the field, but they can do whatever they want in that field. They want to go on the swing, swings, they can go. They want to make a sandcastle in the sandpit, they can do. Whatever the child wants to do, they can do. They have that minute independence. But they are restricted by the field, which is the body. And the child is like the soul there. But there's someone there with a CCTV, let's say. And they can see, oh, in each field, he's doing this. And so they know all fields. Then that is the Supreme Lord. However, this analogy falls apart because the Lord is in everyone's heart, but the parent cannot be in every field at the same time. And so this is the sort of the understanding that we have. The Lord, he's situated in everyone's heart. He sees everything. Okay, this is the concept of soul and supersoul. Finally, verse 19, we conclude this Jneyam section. The field of activity, I'm going to read the verse, sorry. Iti Ksetra.Ksetrajna Jnanam Jneyam choktam samasatah madbhakta eta vijnana madbhavo yopapadyate. Thus the field of activities, body, the knowledge and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain my nature. So although the Lord has described through jnana, you can understand so much, he says in the end, what does he say? Madbhakta eta vijnana. The only person that can understand actually is my devotee. And so then again, he advocates devotional service in the end. There's so much that we can do by our own empirical understanding. First, we can understand how does the material nature work. There's the whole purpose of the physics. How do these energies work? Or in chemistry, you look at how the atoms interact and the compounds interact. Or in biology, look at how living species interact. This is the whole concept of the science. And so it's the same thing, but just carried on. The only limitation is there is that that's material. Now you carry on spiritual as well. Now the next question the Jnani will ask, he will do all these things. The next question he will ask is, who am I? What is my purpose? Where am I going? And how do I get there? That's all. That's why it's the spiritual science or the science of Krishna consciousness. It's actually non-different from the scientific theory, this Jnana Yoga. It's exactly that. And it works. You try it out, hypothesis there, Krishna consciousness will change me. Try it out, experiment, and you will see the result, and you can make those observations and conclusions. Okay, so devotional service is advocated even there. Lord Krishna has subtly put. Now the second to last section is 20 to 26, Prakriti and Purusha and how they interact. Let's go back to the beginning. Lord Krishna has 6 questions. And Lord Krishna has answered 3, 4, 5, and 6. Kshetra, body. Ksetrajna, the knower of the body. There's 2. There's the soul and the super soul. Jnana, the knowledge, is that which liberates you from this existence. And Jneyam is the goal of knowledge. Little point to mention, if I need to leave the body, or if I need to leave the field of action, that doesn't mean I don't use the field of action. But as we mentioned in the first 6 chapters, what you want to do is you want to use the body to leave the body. You want to use the body to leave this material world. So you want to employ your actions and services and whatever you can in Krishna consciousness, because that's the method that's prescribed by Bhagavad Gita. Very practical and very easy to do, and very sweet. So Prakriti is material nature, and Purusha are the enjoyers. Now, this is interesting. Okay. The living entity thinks, I am the enjoyer. That's why we come here. The soul is Sat Chit Ananda by its own existence. It is eternally full of knowledge and bliss. The Lord is also Sat Chit Ananda, but he is there to a higher extent, a higher quality, higher quantity, sorry. But the soul is Sat Chit Ananda. It is spiritual, it's not material. Yet, because we think I am the enjoyer, we come into this material world. And in order to interact with these 24 material elements, we are given the body. So the body is the medium by which the soul can interact with material nature. Not that difficult when you think about it. The soul can't interact with material nature, it's transcendental. The body is material, so that when the soul accepts a body, then the embodied living entity can interact with the world. So therefore, the soul does not experience any suffering, but the body will. Because the nature of this world is dukkhalema shashvata. It's a place of misery. We either know it's a misery, it's not that sometimes there is suffering. I heard recently, it's not sometimes there is suffering, but sometimes we realize there is suffering. Other times we think there's happiness, but actually it's suffering only. Because if happiness leads to misery, then is it really happiness? No, it's just misery. And so this is the concept is that the body and the soul are there, and the body is given to the soul so that the soul can interact with material nature. Now what happens with that is when the soul wants to enjoy separately, it gets a body, and then the material nature traps it. in a cycle of birth and death. That's the reason, that's how the soul and the body and the nature interact. In summary, we'll just get through the verses that explain that very nicely. In verse 20, we see that both the soul and the body are, both the soul and material nature are eternal. And the soul is that in there called Purusha, and the material nature is called Prakriti. But then when you have a higher level of understanding, you say, no, soul can't be Purusha, because the soul doesn't enjoy. The super soul is the Purusha. The super soul enjoys. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram. That the super soul is the real enjoyer. And so when you see that, then you understand that actually the soul is not Purusha, but he's Prakriti only. He or she is Prakriti. The soul is an energy of the Lord. It's described like this also in the 15th chapter. He describes that my superior energy. Oh no, it's not 15th, 7th chapter. 7.4, he describes the inferior energy, which is the elements, and then he says, Aparayamitastvanyam prakritim vidyame param jiva bhuta mahabhaho yedam dharyate jagat. The living entities that are exploiting this material nature, they are my energy only. So when then you realize, actually, it's not two Purushas, one Prakriti, but it's two Prakritis and one Purusha. Material nature is Prakriti, living entity is Prakriti, and the Purusha there is the supreme enjoyer, Lord Krishna. And when you understand that the living entity thinks that I am the God, but when they realize that I'm not the God, I'm actually the energy of the Lord, and the only way I can enjoy when the Lord has become happy, when the Lord becomes happy, then we come to the proper understanding. This is called mature understanding or devotional understanding, which the devotees understand. And then verse 23. So verse 22. Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jnana karanam guna sangosya sadda sadyoni janmashu. The living entity does follow his ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. Next chapter. Due to his association with that material nature, he meets good and evil among various species. Our fields may be different, but the living entity is the same quality. My mother has a different body to me, and my sister has a different body to me, and my dad has a different body to me. We all have different fields. An elephant has a different body to me, but actually the soul, Atma, is the same type. So the field of action changes, and so it's the living entity's interactions with the material nature which makes him good and evil among the species. That's the point there. Purusha prakritistohi. He thinks I'm Purusha, but actually he's prakritistohi. He's situated, he's just another energy. And so that's the important point. But then 23, Upadrishtanu manta cha bharta bhokta maheshwara paramatmeti chapyukto dehesmin purusha para. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul. People may say, sometimes commentaries, they say Paramatma, Atma, same. Lord clearly says no. Paramatmeti chapyukto, the Supersoul. Dehesmin purusha para. And it's transcendental. It's beyond the deha, the body. It oversees the body. It permits the body. It's like a sanction. But it does not do. So that's the interesting bit. Body, soul, super soul. This is really the essence of this chapter. Okay, and finally, we're going to get into verses 25 and 26. Dhyanenatmani pashyanti kechidatmanam anye sankhena yogena karma yogena chapare. Some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through cultivation of knowledge, and others through fruits of desires. So he's given the simple aspect: Ashtanga yoga, Jnana yoga, and Karma yoga. Those are the three ways, simply put, that you can get under super soul realization. Why is that realization important? Because it liberates us. That's what the real knowledge is. Okay, but then he says in 26, he's mentioned Karma, Jnana, and Ashtanga yoga. 26, he says, Anyetve namajananta shrutvane bhya upasate tepi chati tranantyeva mrityum shruti parayana. Again, there are those who, not conversant in the spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So simply the devotee or the bhakti yogi, by listening to the authorized scriptures or the authorized people, they also will naturally develop this. They don't do any extra effort, simply by worshipping the Lord and carrying out devotional service and listening to the right authority. That's why when we went back into the middle 6 chapters, Lord Krishna says that shunu, importance is there of hearing. Why? Because hearing is the easy, simple way. From a bona fide source you hear, you develop this understanding, you don't have to try anything else. Aradito yadi hari tapasa tatatkim, naradito yadi hari tapasa tatatkim, antar bahir yadi hari tapasa tatatkim, nantar bahir yadi hari tapasa tatatkim. It says in this verse that simply by worshipping. Aradito yadi hari means worshipping Lord Hari, tapasa tatatkim. Do you need to do any austerity? No. What's the purpose of austerity if you're worshipping Hari? Naradito yadi hari tapasa tatatkim. If you're not worshipping Hari, what's the point of austerity? Because it doesn't lead to the culmination or the real essence of Vedic practice. Antar bahir yadi hari tapasa tatatkim. If you can see the Lord is within and without of everything, what's the use of austerity? Nantar bahir yadi hari tapasa tatatkim. And if you don't see the Lord is within and without of everything, what is the purpose of austerity? You only lead yourself to unnecessary, extraneous efforts, which is just hard work, which results in not really the essence of anything. No point. Lord says, Vedeshcha sarve ahameha vedya. And so actually, I am the essence of all Vedic literature, is what the Lord says. So there's no need to do any extra effort. By devotional service, it's in 19th verse and in the 26th verse, Lord has advocated only devotion in the end. Okay, and now we get the final section, which is now Lord has answered everything, how they interact. In depth, if you want to go and analyze, please do the Bhagavad Gita, the purports. They're very nicely described. There's no confusion, no room for confusion in the purports. And so now, with this knowledge, how do you act? What is a person with this knowledge like? How does he act? What is his vision? Verse 28, it says that one who sees the Supersoul accompanying the individual in all bodies, and one who understands that neither the soul nor the Supersoul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. Real seeing, ya pashyati sapashyati. The real seeing is one who sees the Supersoul and the soul in everybody, and he understands that neither of them are destructible. That is the real understanding. The body is destroyed, the soul and the Supersoul are transcendental, but the soul has taken the body. The Supersoul is not affected, it's not limited by the body. That is actually seen. Very similar to when we already described Supersoul realization early on in the 5th chapter. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini shuni chaiva svapakedya pandita samadarshana. By the dint of the knowledge, this is what the knowledge should do. The knowledge, wise man by dint of knowledge, he sees with equal vision an elephant, a cow, a brahmana, and a chandala. Every species, no, there is no gender, there's no sexism, there's no racism, there's no speciesism. What to speak of living entities and humans, but even different, like even Brahma, they will see the same way. Lord Brahma is also a living entity. So they will see with that equal vision. And also we've seen this again in the 6th chapter as well, when we said, Jnana vijnana triptatma kutasto vijitendriya yukta ityuchate yogi sama loshrashma kanchana. He sees equally, by knowledge and realization, he sees equally, sama loshrashma kanchana, the pebbles, the rocks, and the gold. Very difficult for us to see gold as the same as rocks. If I say, Prabhuji, Mataji, here's some gold, here's some rocks, which one do you want? Which one is equal? Are they equal? You say, no, give me the gold, please, yeah. Because we're not like that yet. We're not at that level. But this is what the Paramatma understanding does. In all living beings you see as equal, and not only that, but all levels you see as equal. The only thing you see as greater is the Supreme Lord, and everything else is equal. How can you then harm someone? How can I say a mean word to you? How can I attack you if I see that the Lord is there in your heart? How can I kick you with my foot if I see the Lord is there in your heart? That's why Bhim is there in the Mahabharat. There's a story where Bhim and Hanuman meet, and Hanuman takes the guise of an old sage, and he's old monkey with the tail across the path. Now Bhim can simply go around the path, but Bhim has his little ego. He's a Kshatriya warrior, very big, very strong. So he says, "Can you please move your tail for me?" And Hanuman, in the disguise of an old monkey, says, "No, I'm too old now. Look at me. You move the tail." Oh no! First he says, "You kick it," and Bhim says, "No, I won't kick because the Paramatma is there in your heart." How can you be disrespectful to someone else when you see this? How can you make divisions when you see this understanding? Samam sarveshu bhuteshu, seeing all living entities equally. And the other thing is that there's a phrase, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. that the whole world you see as one family. Those with narrow minds, lagu chetana, they see that they see this is mine, that is yours, this is mine, that is yours. But when one sees like this, with open mind, by the dint of this knowledge, then one can see the whole world as one family. There is no notion of disrespect at all in Vedic literature. Whether it be disrespect to unborn living entity, the plants, the animals, no disrespect. Always there is respect. If someone says, I am a devotee of Lord Vishnu, I don't like Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is not God. I will disrespect Lord Shiva. Or someone says, I'm a devotee of Lord Shiva, I will disrespect Lord Vishnu. They are not devotee. End of. Simple. Because no disrespect is there in Vedic literature. They have not understood the philosophy. It's as simple as that. They are using the philosophy to create division instead of seeing equally, instead of seeing with the unity. This is the essence of the Supersoul realization. One sees like this, they are able to become liberated. This is what is seen in the verses 29 as well. In verse 31 as well, this mature vision we see where the sensible man ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies, and he sees how beings are expanded everywhere. He attains the Brahman conception. This is brahma-bhuta stage. This is what we call Brahman understanding. Brahman understanding is not that Brahman is supreme and from Brahman comes God. That's not Brahman understanding. That's Mayavadi understanding. We are covered by Maya at that time. Brahman understanding is the place where we can get devotion is perfect on the Brahman understanding. When we see living entities all have the Vijnana Brahma, which is sometimes called the Supersoul, the Spirit Soul, but they also have Ananda Brahma in them, the Spirit, the Supersoul. Vijnana Brahma, Spirit Soul, or the living entity, and Ananda Brahma is the Supersoul. We see that. This is the real Brahman understanding. We can see that we treat them all equally. We see that there are different identities, but just because the different identities are there, we don't treat them differently. And that's why we actually don't see them as different bodies. And people with a high level of the understanding like this, Shukadeva Goswami, he used to see no difference between male and female. That's it. He wouldn't even make a distinction there. And so he's walking past the group of women that are bathing. They don't cover their body at all. They're fine. It's fine. He doesn't make any distinction like that. But then Vyasadeva, his father, walks past, and immediately start covering their body. Why? They say to Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva says, why you did that? You didn't cover. No, I just want to know what's the interesting detail. Why so? And so they say, because he does not make a distinction and you make a distinction. There's a technicality there as well, why Vyasadeva has to make a distinction. He's Grihastha, so he has to. But Shukadeva Goswami is so self-realized, he's on this Atmarama stage, no problem. He will see them as equal. And that is the perfect environment for devotional service. Atmaramaschamanayo nirgranto purkrame kurvanna haitu kim bhaktim ittam bhuta gunohari. I always like to sneak in this verse somehow or another. Now I've done it again. Atmarama or brahma-bhuta or atma-bhuta stage is this understanding that we've spoken about. And when you're on this stage, you can then develop devotional service. Those people that are already self-satisfied, but even though they're self-satisfied, something is there about the Lord which attracts them. And they get even more pleasure. They're already extremely happy, but they get intoxicated in real pleasure when they hear about the glories of the Lord. Brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashoshati nakangshati. There's no worries and lamentations on that stage. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu, same. You see all living entities as equal. Mad bhakti labhate param. On that stage, you can attain devotional service. So we have to come to that level of understanding. So it comes in the end. You come to a level of understanding to only get devotion. As we said, devotion is the means. How can you come to Atmarama, Brahma-bhuta stage? Devotion. How can you go past that and see the Lord in his Bhagavan aspect? Devotion. This is it. Devotional service is the end. And finally, we'll get into the summary of this whole chapter, verse 35. We'll read the verse and the translation. Ksetra.Ksetrajna Jnana antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye viduryanti te param. Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body, the knower of the body, and can also understand the processes of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. All things have been answered there. Ksetra.Ksetrajna, the body and the knowers of the body, the soul and supersoul. When you understand this, then you get real knowledge, which is liberation. And how do you get to that knowledge? That process by carrying out devotion actually is the way that Lord has described as the easiest one. And from that way, then you reach the object of knowledge, which is supersoul. That is the real, and that is the supreme goal. And so that is the essence of this chapter. Simply put, we've covered a lot of things, but there's a body, there's a soul, and there's a super soul. We've added in the third factor. The soul and the super soul, same in quality, difference in quantity. The qualities that we have, the Lord has, but we have bindu bindutaya in very small atomic quantities. And so that's the difference there. They're the same in quality, however. And so in that sense, there is a oneness. There's not a oneness of identity, but a oneness of quality. And there's also a difference in the quantity there. So that's why we say achintya beda abeda. Achintya, inconceivable, must be. If it's conceivable, then there's something gone on wrong. And abheda and beda. Beda means the different. Abheda means same. It's dualism is not right. Non-dualism is also not right. That's why the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, people think that some of them are dualistic, some of them are non-dualistic. All of them go by this principle. All of them go by this principle, whether we understand or we don't understand. All the bona fide Sampradayas, they take the understanding that the Lord is inconceivable. He's neither one with the living entity, and he's neither different from the living entity. He's both one with the living entity, and he's both different from the living entity. That's the understanding given. And then a simple summary verse to understand that. Jivera swarupahaya krishnera nitya dhasa krishnera tatastha shakti bheda bheda prakash. The constitutional position of the living entity always is a servant of Lord Krishna. It's our natural nature to serve. Jivera swarupahaya krishnera nitya dhasa. Krishnera tatastha shakti. We are the energy of the Lord. We are one of the energies of the Lord. Bheda abheda prakash. And we are different, but we're also the same. Just in the same way, the sun and the sun rays, the sun is there. Sorry, not the sun. Just in the same way you get the ocean and the beaker. The water in the beaker is the same as the water in the ocean, but at the same time, it's the difference in quantity as well. So that is the relation between the soul, the Lord, the body, and the goal. The goal is to try and get to the Lord. And all these are very nicely described in this chapter. At the levels of understanding we have, there is a difference, but the knowledge should lead to this brahma-bhuta stage. We need to see all living entities as equal. Are we developing those qualities that I mentioned earlier? Are we seeing the living entities as equal? Are we becoming non-violent? Are we becoming clean? Are we becoming organized? Devotee is organized so that they can carry out devotional service. If you're not organized, how are you going to carry out devotional service? You have too many things to worry about. Are we simple? Are we steady? Are we self-controlled? Are we equipoised in all situations? Are we realizing the material world leads to misery? This is the essence of this chapter. Body, soul, soul, super soul. Soul takes a body to interact with material nature. The Lord is inconceivable, and actually devotional service without doing anything extra, we will understand all of this very simply. And so I actually wanted to finish this a little earlier, but I kind of dragged it out, I think. I hope people understood the points though. My main worry was when I read this chapter, there's actually so much more depth, which I have not missed. I will definitely say that now. There are so many more stages of understanding. In the fourth verse, you will see all the different, there is Jnanamaya, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, different levels of understanding, different changes the body goes through. The body, there's a germination, there's a flowering of fruits, there's a changes, there's a developing of these, bodily fluids, etc. like that. There's always so much more depth that is available if you really want to research. I really want to say one point, and this is my ending point now that we've discussed everything in the chapter. Yudhishthira Maharaj says, the real way we can understand knowledge. A lot of people, this is a very philosophical chapter. People love philosophy. Oh, I'll take this and I'm going to argue with you and I'll argue with this. And then what I'll do, I'll just go to the pub and drink. They've not understood anything. Let's please apply this. The real way to get knowledge is tarko pratishta shrutayo vibhinna. But not by arguing. Nasavrashir yasya matam na bhinnam dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. Where is the real dharma hidden? Where is it locked and secretly hidden? Mahajano yenagata sapanta. The real truth, the real essence of dharma is there in the hearts of the devotees. And those devotees, we can see that they have taken devotional service. That's what makes one a devotee. Devotion makes devotee. And so when you take to what a devotee does, that's the easiest and most simple way to take the truth. People love to argue about this chapter in particular because it's confusing. People will love to argue. That's not the point of Vedic understanding. If we're arguing and we see no application in our life, then it's useless. We need to apply it. So please try and apply this devotional service. Check yourself against those qualities, and if there are doubts, please do ask and clarify them with bona fide sources. That's the essence of this chapter. Sorry, I did drag it out, definitely. If you're sleeping, there you go. You'll catch up on sleep now. And if you're not sleeping, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, all devotees who have stayed on the call. I've continuously seen about 5 or 4 people. I know it's been a while since we did this. And I can understand why there's always less people in this type of class, because it's confusing in itself. But thank you for those who have stuck with it. We'll see each other third Sunday, if possible, where we will discuss a much easier chapter, much more simple chapter, and a much more famous chapter, which is the modes of material nature, chapter 14. On the 20th, Sunday the 20th of June, prasadam will be served in your own home. I don't know if there are any questions. I'll wait a minute. But if there are questions, please do ask now. Shiva Prabhu said thank you. Thank you very much, Shiva Prabhu, for joining, and all others who are on. But if there are no other questions, then we can wind up for today. I actually wanted to finish early and do a little kirtan at the end, but it's fine. This is the way it works. And we'll just wait for a minute or two, see if there are any questions. Okay then, I don't see anything coming up in the chat. It looks like there's enough time lag, so people would have heard that now. So next week after next week, we will do the next chapter. Very nice chapter, the modes of material nature. And so again, with that knowledge that we get from the modes of material nature, similar conclusion, similar understanding, but also much easier. So very inconceivable class today. We'll see each other next week. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Prasadam will be served next week, that time at your own. Hare Krishna.